If you followed the last couple videos that I've done in dressed irons here, you know that I was asked by a local fly shop to do a class on some bonefish flies. And this is the Veverka's Mantis Shrimp. And this is the third and final bonefish fly that I did for that class. It's an excellent pattern. I've been fishing the Mantis Shrimp patterns for bonefish since 2008, and they are just phenomenal. They are so easy to cast, to retrieve. There's nothing to them, and boy, do they get the attention of the fish. This one has a little bit of a twist to it. It has some mono eyes, monofilament that we put in there, and a couple of interesting steps in terms of tying in the legs along the body. And we're using, the body is going to be using some craft fur under fur as our dubbing. But otherwise, pretty straightforward pattern. Excellent fly to have if you happen to be chasing bonefish anywhere. So that is Veverka's, and I hope I pronounced that right, Veverka's Mantis Shrimp. We'll get started tying. We start our Mantis Shrimp by putting the hook in the vise. This is a Mustad 34007 hook. You could use, say, a 34011 if you want a little bit longer body on this. For thread, I'm using a Danville Fly Masters Plus in a tan color. I'm going to attach this after I debarb the hook. I'm going to attach that right behind the eye of the hook. And I'm going to leave it just an eye length behind the eye so that that's where I'll tie in the bead chain eyes. Like a lot of these shrimp patterns, they use bead chain eyes. Some of them will use a leaded dumbbell eye. It is up to you. It depends on how fast you want this to sink, how spooky the fish are, the depth of the water, the clarity, that sort of thing. These are just a silver bead chain eyes and a medium. I'm going to make certain those are tied in about an eye length behind the eye of the hook. I am not using a weed guard on this, so I am not going to leave some space behind the eye of the hook there and in front of the bead chain eyes for a weed guard. Make certain you do leave that space if you want to have a weed guard on these. You could also put some lead wraps right behind the bead chain eyes if you want a little bit more weight to this, but you like the profile of the bead chain eyes. Run my thread all the way down the shank of the hook. All of this is going to get covered up with a dubbed body, so I'm not that concerned about having nice touching turns or anything like that. The first material that I'm going to tie in for the tail on this is some craft fur. And this is a tan craft fur. The tail on this is generally only about a hook length long, so it's going to be maybe 1 hook length to 1.5 hook lengths long, and it doesn't have to be super thick. So I'll cut off maybe about the equivalent of what would be a square inch off of my craft fur off of the backing. If you've watched any of the other videos I've done on these bonefish flies in the last couple of weeks, you'll see how I clean this. I'm going to hold this right about the middle and then pull out these shorter fibers. I don't need these for in the tail, so I'm just going to thin those, get those out of there, and then I'm going to, I've got all of my fibers for the tail that I want, except these are a little bit too long, so I'm going to pull those out and remarry those back with the others so that I have a nice taper to it, but I don't have anything super long off the end of this. I'm going to measure this so that it's about a hook length, which is going to be from front of the eye of the hook to the bend of the hook. That will be my tie-in spot right about there. I want to cut these so that they go all the way up to the bead chain, simply because that will fill up the hook shank a little bit more for me. I'll double check these. Using a pinch loop right here, I will secure those onto the hook shank, wrapping my thread down the hook shank just a little bit, not down the bend, but just down the hook shank a little bit to anchor those in, and then I'm going to wrap forward. Wrapping forward here, all I'm doing is collecting the craft fur fibers along the hook shank. Again, this is a dubbed body, so I'm not that concerned about all of this looking smooth and pretty. This is definitely more of a fishing fly than it is a fly that really needs to be looking real good. So next I'm going to tie in some flash accent as kind of antenna on our shrimp right here. I'm going to take one strand right here, full strand. I'm going to double that over and cut that. And then at the midpoint of those two, I'm going to bring that up under the thread and around to my side. I definitely want these to be on the sides of the tail, not on the bottom. And then I'm going to bring the other two strands to the other side and wrap those in. Collecting all of those, I'm going to clip those off so they're maybe about 1/4 of an inch, 3/8 of an inch past the end of the craft fur fibers right here. Now, one of the interesting things for this particular fly is that it has some mono black eyes in it. A lot of mantis shrimp patterns that I've fished in the past didn't have any eyes, but this one we're using some monofilament to make some eyes. You can purchase these already pre-made if you want to, but they're very, very easy to make. What you're going to do is take some 30 or 40 pound monofilament. This is some old 30-pound monofilament that I wouldn't trust anymore, but it works great for turning around and making these dumbbell eyes. You'll take a lighter and or a candle. If you're going to do a whole lot of these, I'll have a candle, and you're going to melt this down into a little ball on the end. Once that's done, then just take you some black nail polish, and you're just going to paint the ends of the monofilament where the balls are like this, so you end up with just little black mono eyes. Now again, I start out with a piece that's about 3 or 4 inches in length, so that one, I have plenty to melt back and then plenty to handle when I'm painting this and then setting it out to dry. When I am going to mount these in, I want to mount those so that the eyes are maybe a half a shank length or so past the bend. If the mono's too long, I can always trim it off. So now with these already made, I'm going to cut these right about the halfway point down those eyes. These do have a little bit of a curve in the monofilament because of coming off the spool. If you want to, you can use some of that curve so that this does curve outward. I find that sometimes in the tying of this fly, the material will kind of pull those together. We can always bend those out a little bit later. But we're going to mount those right on the side of the body. So I'm holding those in place. I'm going to get a few wraps in here just to turn around and hold those down to the shank. Make certain that's positioned right on the very side. And then I'll start putting in more wraps, a little bit tighter, just to hold that all in along the hook shank. Again, be careful not to wrap too much further down past where everything's anchored here, because you can pull those eyes on down, but they're really easy to bend out like this. So then we'll flip over and we'll get the other one tied in. So we have both of these tied in. As you can see, they're not exactly, in the same plane here, how they're tied in and everything, but these are very easy to kind of pull and and move around. And also remember, after catching a fish or two on these are probably going to start getting mauled up anyway, and some of that will flake off there. One thing I did want to point out with these mono eyes, you can do, a lot of people like to do with these, is after they have the mono eye already done, so you've painted these with some nail polish and everything, they'll dip these in some either epoxy or more likely some UV resin, which is just going to give it a thicker ball around there, a thicker coating. They hit it with that UV resin, and what that's going to do is it's going to bulk it up a little bit. It also makes it look kind of translucent, like this is the pupil that's down inside of an eye. But mostly it's going to help protect that nail polish a little bit so it doesn't chip off quite so fast. So with our two eyes on, we're going to flip the fly over, because now we're going to tie in our carapace. I'm not exactly certain what it's called in shrimp, but I know on crawdad patterns it is the nose, the snout, the part of the crustacean that has the mouth parts in it. And I'm using some tan rabbit zonker for this. If you've got tan rabbit fur, you can certainly use that. I just have these tan zonkers. They're just as easy to collect a bit of this and then cut that right off the hide right here. And then you just collect all of that together so that we're keeping our tips of our hair out here. I don't want to pull the under fur out. I like to keep that so it has a little bit of bulk to it. I want the tips of the rabbit to go maybe about as far back as about the eyes. So bringing that down in to the gap of the hook, I'm going to put a wrap or two on that to secure it. Try not to have the hair get pushed around to the other side. You don't want it on the other side. And then if that's insecure, I can kind of comb back the hair fibers to see that they're the right length, and those are good. Then I can put a few more wraps in to secure that down. Flipping it over, I'm going to bring the thread down here to the end of the shank. This is now going to be the very end of the body right here. So all of that rabbit is tied in and floating around in the air. Okay, so now I'm going to tie in my first set of legs on my mantis shrimp. This mantis shrimp has 3 sets of legs to it. The very first one goes in right here. I'm going to take my pumpkin sili-legs, same ones that I've been using on some of these other flies, tans, and these pumpkin colors are all great. I'm going to find the midpoint of the sili-legs and bring it up under the thread over to my side of the hook. I'm going to wrap backwards, get in position for tying in the other strand over on the other side. And I do want these to be on the sides, not all clumped up on the back. Remember, the dumbbell eyes, the bead chain eyes, are going to flip this fly over, so it will actually ride in the water like this. So this is actually the back. I'm going to secure all those down, and then I will be ready. Clean this up just a little bit, then I will be ready to start dubbing the body on. I want to trim these, and I'm going to trim these so they're about the same length as the flash, maybe even a little bit longer. I find that if these are a little bit longer, they're just going to have more action in the water and attract fish even better. So with that in place, I'm going to put some head cement all on the thread wraps here, like this. Let that soak in real well. And then we can start dubbing the body on our mantis shrimp. So with the tail and head pieces all in place on our mantis shrimp, we're ready to dub the body. I had mentioned in the previous video that you want to save that under fur. that we pulled out of the craft fur, like when we were making these tails and everything, because this stuff is great for dubbing for the body. You could even cut some of these fibers a little shorter if you want, but you'll see for our mantis shrimp we want to keep those long. So what I'm going to do is all those bits of under fur that I took out, I'm just simply pulling those apart, folding them back on top of each other and pulling them apart again repeatedly. And what this is going to do is mix up the shorter fibers and the longer fibers, so now I'm ready to use this for dubbing. The body is basically all dubbed with this under fur, but we're going to dub maybe about a quarter of the hook shank, put in a pair of legs, actually, and those go in on the underside in here. Then we're going to dub another quarter of the shank and put in another set of legs, and then we dub the rest of the shank. And then we're done with the body. So I like to basically, I tend to be sparser with my dubbing noodles because it gives me greater control. So I'm going to put in about a 3 or 4, maybe actually about a 4 or 5 inch, fairly sparse dubbing noodle. I'll show you in just a second here. Like I said, this allows me to get greater control, but however you're comfortable with doing this, see, I've got, should be able to see that, that's only about maybe 4 to 5 inches right there. I'll start wrapping this in right at the end of all of my thread wraps, but I'm kind of wrapping these all right on top of each other in the same spot. I want to bulk this up just a little bit. Remember, this is a shrimp. We want it to kind of have the profile of a shrimp. So I'm going to just get kind of a ball right there and then bring my thread right to the front. With my thread up there, I'll tie in my next set of legs. Same thing, I'm taking legs that are full length. I'm going to bring it up underneath the thread to my side. Now this isn't totally on my side. This is actually kind of quartered, so it's halfway between the very top and the side, so that way they will tend to stick up and out to the side. They're not right on the back, but they'll stick out just a little bit. I can then bring the other one over to the other side, anchor it down in the same position, and those are tied in. And then I'm going to rinse and repeat. When I wrap this dubbing on for this section, I want to actually make certain that I'm kind of wrapping back over on top of those legs so that now the legs look like they just come right out of the body. I don't want a distinct segment right there. And once again, I'm kind of piling those wraps on top of each other. Don't worry about this stuff sticking out here. You'll see in a minute we're going to draw some fibers out. But then after I advance down about another quarter of a shank, I'll go ahead and tie in the last set of legs, same as I did the middle ones. Just come up kind of on the, not on the top or the side, but kind of halfway down, so they stick up and out. Fold the other one over, same position, secure those down, and now I'm going to go ahead and do my dubbing, but I'm going to dub out the rest of the fly up to the eye of the hook. When I'm dubbing this section here, I want to start putting in a little bit of a taper, and I want that to end right behind the eyes, and then I'm going to do a very sparse long dubbing noodle, maybe 5 inches, really sparse, to do multiple crisscross wraps around the dumbbell eyes to cover it up, but I don't want to bulk up around the bead chain eyes, I should say, not dumbbell eyes. So I cover those up. I'm going to get a little bit more of a taper in there. Tighten up my dubbing noodle a little bit. There we go. And then I can bring this down here, get my taper. Wouldn't worry, I've got a little bit of a segment there and it's kind of lumpy here, but you'll see in a minute how we're going to even that out. It doesn't have to be a super smooth dubbed body. This is a great fly if you're wanting to, or at least technique I should say, if you're wanting to work on your dubbing skills, because it doesn't have to be essentially perfect. With a sparser noodle, and now I'm going to run some crisscross wraps right around the dumbbell eyes, keeping that tight so that I get all the thread wraps covered up, but I'm not adding a lot of bulk between the bead chain eyes. Keep saying dumbbell eyes, I mean bead chain eyes. A few wraps to secure that and a 4 or 5 turn whip finish. It's all that's needed up on the front here. Tighten that up. I'm going to add some head cement right to those thread wraps and right down at the base there, kind of anchor all that in. Now the dubbing that we use the craft fur is in very, very nice and secure in there, but I do want to make this a little bushier. So I'm going to take my dubbing teaser, and this is nothing more than a stick with the hook side of some Velcro attached to it. And I'm going to start teasing some of that out. So this is where, as you can see, it really isn't, if I have a little bit of a gap here or there, it doesn't really matter because I'm kind of blending that out, but I'm also teasing some of these fibers out, and you'll see why in just a second. Definitely want to tease a bunch right at the back end here, maybe more in the back than you do in the front, because when this is all swept back here, it is going to take on very much kind of a shrimp profile. So I tease all those out, and then when I'm stroking all of those back, see swimming through the water here, this is going to have very much kind of a shrimpy profile. So that works out pretty darn nice. I really wouldn't worry about any of these fibers that are sticking out like this. They're not going to interfere with the performance of the fly. I'm trimming them probably more out of just habit than anything else. But that is our Mantis Shrimp. It's a very, very good pattern. I've been fishing these for bonefish since 2008, and it's an excellent pattern, easy to throw, easy to retrieve. Not much in it in terms of tying. You could even leave the eyes out if you want, the mono eyes, if you want to skip that step. The first ones that I ever fished never had these in there, so. But for this particular pattern, they are in there. So there you go. One Mantis Shrimp. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this video and not only learned a new pattern, but maybe learned some new techniques and a few new skills. If you like this video, please hit that thumbs up button below. You can support Dressed Irons by hitting the subscribe button, and don't forget to hit the bell icon so you get notified when new videos are published. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. Until next time, remember, it's fly time. If you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong.